regulator, which is going to protect fans, make sure that football is financially sustainable. And I've also got the media bill, which organisations like yours, I'm sure, are very pleased about, making sure that, when you try and search LBC on your new digital devices, you will get them on your smart speaker, and also bringing in a really important provision in relation to press freedom. So we're going to be repealing Section 40, which will mean that papers won't have to pay the costs of litigation, even if they win. So that's a great measure for press freedom.
Well, obviously I celebrate that, but I suppose I better put a question to you about the football. How will the regulator actually work? What will he or she be able to do? What powers? How sharp will the teeth be?
We want to bring in a regulator that works, but that is proportionate and that will work with football. The reason we're bringing this in is because for decades we've asked football to sort out the issues within football in terms of financial instability. We've seen fans and clubs devastated by their clubs going down to the wall and being destroyed. And what we want to do is to protect that. So we're bringing in a regulator who will have a backstop on the financial distributions that are distributed from the Premier League through to the other leagues, which is really important. Football will have a chance to sort that out itself, but if it doesn't, the regulator will have an ability
just to clarify, so more cash can flow down from the Premier League through to the Championship and the lower leagues.
Exactly, that's exactly what it is. But also to ensure financial stability. So at the moment, what we want to do is to ensure that clubs don't go into administration. They don't, they're not wound up. And what the financial regulator will do is make sure that the clubs have financial plans in place, that their owners, we have owners and directors tests to make sure that those clubs are financially sustainable and they're not going to end up in administration.
What might make it impossible for me to buy a football club? What would you be looking out for? Dubious sources of income, or what is it you'd be wanting to try and stop?
We'd want to stop criminality. We'd want to stop you being a person who shouldn't be owning a club because you've been bankrupt, for instance. So, we're not bringing in overly burdensome regulation that's going to stop what is our great game of fantastic Premier League, which is world class. We want football to survive and continue to thrive, but we don't want to see those clubs, which we have seen, unfortunately, in recent times, not being able to continue to put on their games where their fans are devastated. So this is a bill to protect fans and to protect football.
Lastly on this, then, there's been suggestions it could fall to that well-known fan of Race Rovers, I think it is, Gordon Brown, who could become the football regulator. Is he a runner and a rider?
We'll be having an open competition, and I would encourage anyone who has the skills to apply. And we'll be doing
the skills would be?
Well, the skills we'll be looking for a variety of things. This is financial regulation.
Gordon Brown. Yeah, a knowledge of football. Gordon Brown.
Understanding the industry, being able to work with a number of stakeholders. I look forward to when we make those applications. I hope a number of people come forward. This is going to be a really important role. And I have no preconceptions about who that person would be. So you would welcome an application
from Gordon Brown?
I would welcome many applications from many people, and I look forward to making it. It's also independent from government, the football regulator.
OK, I'm going to put the first call through. Let me know that you can hear Hannah in Manchester nice and clearly. Hannah, you're through to the Secretary of State. Go ahead. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Jewish and of Israeli descent, and I've lived in the UK for over 50 years. Given that protesters refuse to respect the sanctity of Armistice Day and our fallen soldiers who made the ultimate sacrifice, and given that a veteran was physically attacked, punched and kicked by pro-Palestinian protesters, and given the anti-Semitic chants and slogans at these protests, what are the government and police doing to protect British culture and traditions and British Jews?
Hannah, just in a sentence, or a quick yes or no, do you think the march should have been banned on Saturday, Hannah?
It's a very, very difficult question because there could be major repercussions,
Okay. All right.
But I think if these are peace marches based on humanitarian lines, why Why did none of the protests condemn the massacre on
All right.
October the 7th, which triggered these protests?
Indeed. Let's go to the Secretary of State, Lucy Frazer.
Well, Hannah, first of all, can I say, as you're a member of the Jewish community, I know that community is feeling very vulnerable at the moment, feeling very scared, and is really upset and angered by what is happening. And, we, the government, want to make sure that we don't have anti-Semitism on our streets. And you will have seen some very fulsome support by the Prime Minister, by the Foreign Secretary, by the Home Secretary for condemning the horrific terrorist attacks in Israel by a terrorist organisation and killing 1,400 innocent civilians in the most horrific way, and also standing up for the Jewish community here in the UK to make them feel proud to continue to live in our great country. You asked specifically about the marches, and you will know that the police are operationally independent, and this is their call.
Do you agree with their call, Secretary of State? Sorry to talk over you.
We do have a right for peaceful protest, as Hannah has mentioned, but I am concerned about activities that are taking place on these marches. There have been a number of arrests. I do think it is wrong for criminal activity to take place, which is intimidating, which involves extremist behaviour, which involves, incitement to racial hatred. And I do think that the police should think very carefully about that, and I hope that they keep this under review.
So you think they need to review this? I mean, Sir Mark did say there's still the last resort. If intelligence was to reach Scotland Yard, or indeed any other force, I imagine, they could still move to ban it. You would say that would be minded to do that?
Well, I think that the police need to, and have said that they will continue to look at intelligence and will impose conditions. They've already set out where events will take place, but I think they should keep it under review. I think this is a very provocative event. What we're talking about this weekend is respecting those who have fought for our country. We are respecting the fallen, those who put their lives on the line, and the wounded, servicemen and women who gave the ultimate sacrifice, which was their lives for our country. It is a very special weekend.
But I can link almost our first two conversations together, Secretary of State, because you might be aware of an exclusive in today's Daily Mail. Gangs of football hooligans are planning to team up and protect the cenotaph from Palestinian protesters this weekend. Police are on high alert for trouble. What do you say to that? Might have football hooligans deliberately coming down and forming a sort of guard of honour.
Well, I think that we already have plans in place to protect the cenotaph. What we don't want to see is, one group doing this and another group doing that and taking, responsibility into their own hands. The police have a responsibility in order to make sure that our streets are safe. I know that they take that responsibility very seriously, and it is for them to take those calls, to make those decisions, to ensure that people like Hannah feel safe on our streets.
The group involved, it is reported, is called Football Lads Against Extremism, and they could be sending members of their group down. What would your message be to them?
Well, my message is, if you feel strongly about a cause, it's appropriate to respond peacefully, to get your voice heard. We live in a country where we have freedom of expression. But what I do not want to see is any escalation of violence across the board.
Can I also get a word on you before? Hannah, thank you for your call. Jennifer, coming to you in just a moment. There's a story you won't have heard yet, Secretary of State, because it's been broken this morning on LBC. You'll be aware there's another celebration in London on Saturday. It's the Lord Mayor's Show. And there are reports now that organisations such as Extinction Rebellion or Just Stop Oil, and we saw their activities at an art gallery earlier this week, they are thinking of trying to disrupt the Lord Mayor's Show, and LBC has seen a report on that. Again, a word from you on that, if you would, and those protesters.
Well, I think that those protesters who are disrupting our day-to-day lives, who are disrupting things that people sometimes save up a long time for. We've seen a lot of disruption for sports matches, major events over the course of the summer, as you mentioned, the National Gallery, where they're causing criminal damage. I think this is wholly inappropriate. They're campaigning on an issue where the government is taking action already. We care about climate change. We care about net zero. We hear what
You've just granted
people
annual licenses, though, for more oil exploration, more oil and gas exploration.
We have, and the reason we have done that is...
How does that show you care?
We care because we have, as a government, Nick, we have exceeded all our targets in order to get to net zero by 2050. We're ahead of many other countries, but it's right also to take into account the cost of living, how these measures are affecting, ordinary people on the ground.
Before I move on, do you mind my asking, have you encountered any personal abuse over the last 4 or 5 weeks?
I haven't, fortunately. I have over the course of my time being an MP, but
nothing related to those incidents.
Not at the moment.
To Jennifer in Epping, you're through to the Secretary of State. Jennifer, go ahead.
Good morning, Nick. Thank
Hello.
you for having me on the show.
Not
Good
at
morning,
all.
yes.
Yeah.
Secretary of State, I'd just like to ask, a long-standing Conservative MP. I've only ever voted Conservative all my life. I'm a nurse, I'm a businesswoman, and I must say I'm absolutely totally disillusioned by the Conservative Party, and I think my vote won't be coming to you. Given the Prime Minister's commitment to upholding high standards and tackling sleaze within the Tory party, how does the government plan to address the recent arrest of an MP for allegations of rape and drug possessions? And what steps will be taken to prevent and address successive scandals or misconduct within the party?
Secretary of State.
Jennifer, thank you for your support over the years. It is really valued, and I'm sorry that you're disappointed with us as a party at the moment. I come on to your point at the moment, but there's a limitation as to what I can say. But I do want to say to you, look, we really care about tackling the major issues that I'm sure, Jennifer, that you care about. That's getting down the cost of living, making sure that you mentioned you're a nurse.
That's not what the call was about,
I know,
is
but
it? It's about Conservative sleaze, that someone who I think is a lifelong supporter, and whether it's someone who's calling in tractor porn, whether it's someone else, Pincher by Name, Pincher by Nature, this extraordinary book that's come from actually one of your predecessors in your office, Nadine Dorries, The Plot, the political assassination of Boris Johnson, making assertions that there's almost a cover-up of a serial rapist. It's same old Tory sleaze, isn't it?
Well, the reason I didn't begin with that is because obviously some of these are under investigation. The issues that Jennifer raises are under investigation by the police. So obviously I can't comment on that. And I wanted to give her a fulsome answer to her probably underlying issues. Look, I have, of course, as a Conservative MP, as an MP, as a member of society, I'm always disappointed to see when, we are let down, when, human frailty comes to the fore. And it's very, very disappointing. All I can say to you, Jennifer, is that, I have a large number of colleagues. They've all come into public service for the right reasons, to do the right thing. And these incidents that are being reported in the press, I have no personal knowledge of them. These are not incidents that, I feel happen day to day in the House of Commons. And there are a large number of Conservative MPs who are doing the right thing, standing up for people across the country, people like you. And I hope that you will feel able to support us when the next general election comes around.
Jennifer, who are you going to vote for? Jennifer?
I'm teetering on Keir Starmer, but given his remarks on the aid for the Palestinians,
Right.
the water, I'm sort of doubtful about that as well.
All right.
But as I said, in the event of proven misconduct or criminal activity amongst Tory MPs, what measures or policies will party implement swiftly to remove these individuals from office?
Well, you have the Deputy Prime Minister, Secretary of State, in the accusations of this serial rapist saying the following: it may be the case, I'm not denying that it could be the case that payments were made, but it's not something that I authorised. Even he doesn't know what's going on when he was chairman, and he's the Deputy Prime Minister. You're all at sea with Tory sleaze.
Well, I think it's possible that some of these allegations are with the police, so it would be really inappropriate for me to comment. Can I just come
Who's
back?
going to get a grip of this, as Jennifer's saying? Where are the measures going to be?
Well, I hate to say it, but it's not just, unfortunately, issues on our side of the House in relation to
but we're
issues
talking about the Conservative
But of course
Party now.
we're talking about the Conservative Party. These are really, really, there are very serious allegations that have been made against a number of MPs. Anyone who feels that they have been a victim in relation to this must absolutely come forward, and we must deal with them in an appropriate way. Would you mind, Nick, if I just respond to Jennifer's point about voting for the Labour Party?
Briefly, yes, of course. That's
very,
only
very
fair.
briefly.
Yes,
Look. The Labour Party is saying at the moment a number of things that they are going to do. In relation to the economy and tax. But what we see from Keir Starmer is that he changes his mind according to what he thinks people want him to say at any particular moment. Okay. We saw that on Brexit. We see it in taxation. They've made a promise to put another £28 billion in. And if he did get into power, Jennifer, you can't be 100% certain that he will abide by those promises because of the underlying pressure within the Labour Party for him to act as a Labour politician who essentially want to get taxes up, not down.
Will you be reading the plot?
Well, I do read a number of these books.
Will you be reading
I'm sure at
Doris
some
book?
point I will be reading.
Well, it's on sale tomorrow. Will you be buying it tomorrow?
Definitely won't be getting round to
But
it just yet. I got very, very busy
right.
workload, so definitely won't be reading it immediately, but always interesting to see what other politicians have to say.
To James in Bradford, you're on the radio. Your question, James. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, Secretary of State. So yesterday we all seen in the news another teenager in this country has been stabbed to death. This time 3 miles away from where I live. We are sick to death of warm words now. What action are you going to start taking? It's a disgrace.
This is the tragedy of the 15-year-old boy fatally stabbed near some school gates in Leeds. Secretary of State, what did we hear in the King's speech about this knife crime?
Well, James, this is absolutely dreadful for the family, and my heart goes out to them and to everybody in Leeds, where I am originally from. And we do need to tackle knife crime. If I could just start by saying we have as a government done significant amounts in order to tackle knife crime already. You talked about action. Actually, violent crime is significantly down by, I think, around 40%. And what we saw in the
violent crime is down by 40%.
Violent crime is significantly down. I'm going to check the figures. I might not be 100, but it is significantly down by a large number of percentage points. Nick, some apologies if I've got the number inaccurately wrong, but it's significantly down. Violent crime. In fact, all crime is down significantly. And let me tell you, James, what measures we've got.
It doesn't feel like it for James, though, does it?
Well, it's very, very tragic incident. Really tragic incident. But can I just touch on two things?
Go ahead.
First, nationally, and something within my own portfolio. So nationally, you will see, James, measures in the King's speech which increase sentences for those people who conduct really serious crimes, so murders and rapes. They will be getting whole life orders. That means they will never, ever leave prison. So we are cracking down on sentencing for serious criminal activity. But can I just tell you a couple of things that I've been doing in my portfolio? Because I used to be the Minister for Youth Justice and I used to be the Prisons Minister. It's something I care passionately about, that we stop young people going down the wrong path and getting involved in gangs and criminal activity. And as Secretary of State for DCMS, you wouldn't expect this, but I'm responsible for youth. And only last month, I announced a number of measures to make sure that young people had constructive things to do in their life, places to go, someone to talk to, something to do, to stop so they don't get involved in antisocial behaviour, they get involved in constructive behaviour.
Secretary of State, you've referenced you're a prisons minister. Why haven't we got enough prisons?
Well,
why are we looking at renting places overseas?
We have a massive prisons expansion programme.
But we don't have enough jails currently.
We are
reading the King's speech. You want to send more people behind bars, and we haven't got enough cells. So how's that going to work?
Well, we have two provisions in the King's speech. We're very happy to go through. in a moment. But just on your point, Nick, about prison spaces, we have a very large prison population. We are spending, I think, £4 billion on a massive expansion of thousands of more places for prisons. Obviously, that construction takes time, but it's been years in progress, and it will shortly come to fruition. Can I explain, or would you like to get another caller?
I'd like to know if you can do it in a sentence, then, because there's every line in the building trying to speak with you, and I have to reflect that.
Yes, of course. So there are measures that we crack down on serious crime in the prison population, but there are also very sensible measures to make sure that we rehabilitate people who are who do commit less serious offences, who go into prison for a shorter period of time, where we want to rehabilitate them rather than sending them to prison.
Thank you, Secretary of State. That allows me, James, thank you for the call. That allows me to get to Richard in Kingston. And this is, I think, very much on your brief, Secretary of State. Richard, go ahead with your question.
Hi, Secretary of State. Thank you for taking my call. I've been a touring musician, a producer of live music touring shows for the last 20 years or so. And as I'm sure you know, Brexit's made doing business in Europe so much harder and more expensive. For my sector, carnet costs, merch costs, the fact that we now have to often pick up crew in the EU rather than using UK crew because it's just cost prohibitive to do it any other way. And I understand your brief is very wide, and I'd never really understood why culture is put with media and sport. But anyway, that's another issue. But frankly, Tories have shown no interest in my sector.
I've got to move you to your question, Richard. I'm sorry to be rude.
My question is, how are you getting on providing us with a cultural visa, which the EU offered and which was turned down by your predecessor? How are we getting on with making this easier?
Okay.
Richard, my brief is large, but this is an issue that I agree with you on. It's really I've held a number of roundtables on this very issue, talked to the Select Committee about it. I think it is really important that we get touring musicians able to continue to tour without red tape in the EU. We have got an agreement where you can go to EU countries, tour for 90 days. We've done bilateral agreements with most of those countries where musicians want to tour. I think there are only 3 or 4 in the EU where we don't have a bilateral agreement. But this is absolutely, Richard, on my radar. And I'm working with the Foreign Secretary to see if this is one of the things that we can continue to negotiate with the EU.
When can you possibly tell Richard he might hear more? Because obviously he's toiling with this on a weekly basis, I imagine, when there might be some progress for him.
He is, well, look, we want to do this, but it's a question for the EU. So I can't give a commitment on timing because I'm not in control of that. But I would like to take issue with Richard's point that we haven't done anything, because in June I announced a culture sector vision. Creative industries sector vision, support for the industry. And within that was £5 million for grassroots music venues, because we do recognise the importance of the pipeline of talent and musicians, getting that support that they need, both domestically and internationally.
What impact has that, in a sentence, Richard, what impact has that had on your life, the Secretary of State?
Well, the 80 days on the 90 days in 180 days has cost many of my colleagues huge sums of money and lost them, lifetime gigs that they've had. As I said to you, it's cost much, smaller touring operations the opportunity to even go to Europe. And what you just said sounds, about what you've, I can't remember what you referred to it as, but it just sounds like the thick of it to me.
All right, okay. As in the TV show, I think. Richard, thank you. I was going to take some text and emails, and also, of course, we advertised that you were coming, and so calls came via social media as well. Just down the road from Kingston, we go to Richmond and Martin. Good to hear the Secretary of State talk about soccer. What about rugby union? 3 Premiership teams have gone bust. You'll probably be aware of those teams such as London Irish and Wasps. What are you going to do about the rugby Premiership? Where's their money coming? Where's the regulator for them? Well,
we recognise that there are issues in rugby, and that's why a few months ago I appointed 2 people. One of them is Ralph Rimmer, who are working with the rugby authorities to
Sorry, pardon
find.
my ignorance. Who's Ralph Rimmer? I'm sorry. I should
So he's done some work before. He's been involved in rugby,
Right.
and he's actually also non-exec of DCMS.
Right. And who's working with him in this then? Mr. Rimmer and...
Mr. Rimmer, and I'm sorry because their name has just escaped me.
Can I
but
put
two
it to you, this is how
experts
you
in-
take rugby, isn't it?
No, totally.
This is how the government takes
No,
rugby. You get a footballer, you get Gordon Brown possibly to regulate football. Respectfully, you can't even remember the names of the people looking into rugby. That's the reality, isn't it?
So we have appointed two people.
Whose names you can't remember, Secretary of State?
We took action immediately a number of months ago, Nick, to make sure we are not in charge of rugby, but we've done a number of things to support rugby. One, we've got individuals who are working with the rugby authorities.
Whose names you can't remember. Is it Chris Pillington you're searching for?
Yes. It is.
Right.
So you
Well,
do know them. You do know them,
Why
Nick.
does it come to me to tell you? You're the boss.
Well,
You're the Secretary of State.
Well,
I'm a
because Nick, I have
journalist.
a very, very broad portfolio, and I'm here to talk about a large number of national issues.
All right.
And
let's go back
Ralph
to...
Rimmer, Chris Pilling, who I've met on 2 occasions in the last few months.
Well,
we
poor Mr.
also
Pillington.
supported rugby with loans throughout the COVID pandemic.
All right.
It is really important to us, and Chris and Ralph are going to do a great job in order to help us get to the right answer in relation to rugby.
Secretary-
If they want regulation, of course, it's open for them in due course, but we do want sport to sort out these issues themselves.
Let's come back to the football pitch. Andrula. Oh, my goodness. Andrula, you're in Enfield. Can you get your question out, Andrula?
I can. Hi, good morning. I just wanted to say it's been a week since the announcement of the World Cup being held in Saudi Arabia, and so far we haven't had a word for or against the decision from the government.
Okay.
So my question is, are the government reluctant...
Is that Mark Rowley again? Go ahead. Is the government what? Sorry?
No, it's an ambulance, actually.
Oh.
Are the government reluctant to oppose the decision due to the financial and diplomatic ties we have with Saudi, despite their appalling human rights record against their own citizens and the atrocities committed in the Yemen using British-made arms?
Andrula, thank you for bearing with that ambulance. Let's hope everyone's safe there. How comfortable are you, Saudi Arabia, hosting the Men's World Cup?
Well, can I start by saying this is a matter for FIFA,
Yes.
but there are broad issues which I think cross all engagement with other countries, which apply equally to sport as they would be to trade. Those are that if we only ever engaged with kind of values we shared, then we would not be engaging with the whole world. We would be engaging only with a small group. And I do think it's important overall that we work together as nation states to solve and tackle issues. So, and that applies to sport as it does to other issues. But of course, Nick, that's not the only issue where, Saudi Arabia, we don't agree with them on a number of issues, including the way they treat women, their human rights record. And we do absolutely call them out on those issues, both privately and publicly.
But is it because of the deals that
appropriate.
are done, the arms sales, as Andrula has alleged? Is that why we've all gone so quiet on Saudi having the Men's World Cup?
Well, as I said, this isn't a question for the government, it's a question for FIFA.
Well, the British government obviously sells the arms into Saudi, doesn't it? Is that why we're staying silent on this? We did talk about Qatar when they were awarded the cup.
I know that the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister, in discussions with Saudi Arabia, raised these very important issues with them when they have bilateral meetings, and we will continue to do that.
How likely is it Saudi will have the Women's Football World Cup, do you imagine?
Well, again, these
Well,
won't
it's not, is it?
these won't
They're
be
not gonna happen, in all
these are not
honesty.
decisions for me, but it is important that we raise these issues.
Last couple of questions together. Pam in Worcester Park. Have you ever ridden a pedicab? Why has it taken so long to take action on that? This is, of course, again from the King's Speech. These are I would quite call them a rickshaw, if that's, as long as that's not offensive, a pedicab. Why, after 13 years, do the Conservatives consider it necessary to licence the use of pedicabs? Secretary of State.
Because this is an issue that people feel very strongly about, and it is important that we have safety on our streets.
They've been on the streets for more than 100 years. Why now?
The government's put forward a King's Speech, which involves a number of initiatives within it.
Yes.
You could. It's very interesting because these points are generally sometimes made to politicians. So are you saying we should never bring anything forward because we could have brought it in when we first got into
that
office?
with many people bouncing on the bottom on Struggle Street, unable to pay the rent or even the mortgage, being tough on pedicabs and the causes of pedicabs is an extremely interesting or bizarre policy.
It's something that people care very strongly about it. But Nick, you're right to highlight those other things that people care very strongly about. And what we have in the King's speech is measures to grow the economy, which people care strongly about, measures to protect our communities. And you mentioned one, which is, the issue of landlords and tenants, leaseholders and freeholders, and also measures to keep people on the streets safe.
All right. And on that, we come to our final question. I haven't referenced this, but you must be one of the most senior Jewish people in the cabinet, I would have thought, at this time. And this last question, Dan in Boreham Wood, relates to that. Dan, your question to the Secretary of State.
Hello.
Yeah.
Is it, keep it simple, is it anti-Semitic to chant from the river to the sea?
Thanks, Dan.
Dan, I know how people feel about the marches, the number of people on these marches, what they're saying.
The chant specifically.
Their calls, that is a chant that is calling for the eradication of the state of Israel and, by analogy, therefore, the eradication of the Jews within Israel. And I think that is extremely offensive.
And is it, as Dan asked, is it anti-Semitic?
I think it is anti-Semitic.
And how have we got to the situation where an actor on Coronation Street needs a bodyguard? I refer to Dame Maureen Lipman. How have we got to that? You must hold your head... this is very much your culture brief. You must hold your head in your hands over this. Coronation Street, a bodyguard for an actor or actress, whichever you prefer.
I think what we've seen is some very, very horrific attacks by terrorists in Israel, where they've beheaded people and murdered babies. And we must remember that this is how this war started, by terrorist atrocities. And I feel for the Jewish community who are feeling very unsafe. Of course, we also need to ensure that, we protect Palestinians who
Indeed.
are also victims, and the perpetrators of crimes in Israel are Hamas, who are a terrorist organisation.
But Dame Maureen is targeted because other actors put a letter out in which they said that there should be a ceasefire and attacked Israel's activities. Dame Maureen shared the opinion that she thought it was shameful that they didn't refer to Hamas, and now she needs a bodyguard.
Yes. I think the Jewish community, whether you're in a senior position or you're a young kid on the street who wants to wear a Star of David around your neck, or you're a primary school child who can't wear their blazer to school, I think that it's a very, very sad state of affairs in our country. But I would like to say, Nick, because I think it's really important to say, that the Prime Minister has stood very firm, both in support of the state of Israel and, also recognising that it must comply with international law, but also with the Jewish community.
Final question, trying to lift what is a very dark mood. Do you want cricket or Shakespeare? What do you want as your final question?
I'll go with
Shakespeare?
I'll go with whatever you wish.
It's the 400th
They both sound dreadful, Nick.
It's the 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's first folio today.
Yeah.
The major collection of his plays are published after his death.
Yes.
So, with the Prime Minister in the polls with the Conservatives where they are, is it true for Rishi Sunak, uneasy lies the head that wears the crown?
I'm trying to think of a really good Shakespeare quote.
Well, I could have asked you about the England cricket team, but I've spared you that one. And you wouldn't want to go there either. You wouldn't want to be the captain down there, Joss Butler.
I think we, tomorrow, and tomorrow, there we go, creeps in this petty pace from day to day. It's the last syllable of recorded time. Tomorrow is and tomorrow we need to continue to show as a government that we are on their side, working for people. Look, I really believe, Nick, that the Conservative Party have the values to take us forward. And I know we've had some disappointing times, but we're getting inflation down and looking after people across the country.
My best wishes to you and to your family at this difficult time. Lucy Frazer, thanks for appearing on LBC. Let's get
Lovely
some headlines.
to speak to you, Nick.
Thank you, Lucy.
The Culture Secretary has told Nick it's provocative for pro-Palestinian activists to hold a march on Armistice Day. Lucy Frazer has called on the Metropolitan Police to keep under review its decision to allow the demonstration to go ahead. The UN says thousands of Palestinians are fleeing south on foot as Israeli troops move into Gaza City. The area, home to a vast network of tunnels, is central to Hamas operations. Labour's leader is under renewed pressure over the party's position on the conflict in Gaza. Imran Hussein has resigned as a shadow minister over Sir Keir Starmer's refusal to call for a